Evening to everyone, and welcoming all of you on the pre-webinar series of the book launch, which is my second book on Indian data protection laws, so practical guide and handbook on Indian data protection laws. It's an honor and privilege to have Rajiv Jain ji over here with us in the first pre-webinar series, wherein we are going to touch upon a lot of aspects of right to privacy as a right to human rights, maybe as a subset or a bigger aspect of the same, and also how exactly the right to privacy entails with it a lot of responsibility. Apart from the fact, also the kind of threats to privacy can also be posing to national sovereignty and many other aspects, which with the background and experience that Jain shares, he will be able to throw a lot of light on the same for us. To give you an introduction about Mr. Rajiv Jain, he was the director of the Intelligence Bureau of India and belonged to the 1980 batch of the Indian Police Service. He is from the Jharkhand cadre and was appointed on 1st January 2017 as the 26th director of the Intelligence Bureau. While in the Intelligence Bureau, he dealt with a plethora of issues having utmost bearing on national security. He is the recipient of the President's Police Medal and has served on various desks of the Intelligence Bureau, including the sensitive Kashmir desk. He was the advisor to the previous NDA government's interlocutor on Kashmir, Mr. K.C. Pant, when the talks were held with separatist leaders like Shabir Shah. Mr. Jain is currently a member of the National Human Rights Commission of India and is contributing his expertise on the very sensitive aspect of human rights in India as a major role that he has in the NHRC. Thank you very much, Mr. Jain, for being a part of this discussion. It's a privilege and honor to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Am I audible, Mr. Jain?
Yes, you are audible to me, and thank you for having me over. Can you hear me? No, it seems not.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Jain, for being a part of this discussion. And it's going to be an extremely enriching experience for me and for everybody over here to get to hear your words of wisdom on a very sensitive subject like right to privacy. And not just from a theoretical perspective, but from a very practical experience that you bring from your life and professional journey.
I look forward to grilling by you.
No grilling, Mr. Jain, but this is going to be a very interactive session. And I'm really excited. Like even when we had the demo run, just having those answers from you, it really piqued my interest a lot. As a matter of fact, when I met you the first time, it was at that point of time I had decided, when I have my second book launch, you have to be a part of the same. So I was really impressed with the knowledge and the insight that you had at that point of time. So I never told you that ever, but yes, that was the point of time I already had it in my mind that okay, Mr. Jain has to be a part of this.
Thank you.
So should we start the session, Mr. Jain?
Yes, we can do that. I'm ready.
Perfect. I will refer to you as Shri Rajiv ji. I think that's better than Mr. Jain, actually.
That's okay with me. That's okay with me. Yes.
Perfect. My first question to you is, human rights encompasses a broad spectrum of rights, whether it may be right to education, right to life, multiple rights together. How do you see the right to privacy as a human right? So do you think it's given adequate importance as a human right, considering the global scenario? Or what is your views on the same?
So at the outset, let me tell your viewers that this year is very crucial. This year is crucial because human rights were first declared by the United Nations.
We can't hear you, Mr. Jain.
Okay. Is this better now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, this is better now. This is better now.
Okay. So this is the 75th year of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948 by the United Nations. So it has stood the test of time. More countries have joined the United Nations. More countries have also ratified the conventions which embody the principles of the human rights which were there in the Universal Declaration. As you are aware, after the 1948 UDHR, in 1966, there were two conventions. India is a signatory to both the conventions, and they are now enforceable in the country. the UDHR on its own was not enforceable. Around the time that the UDHR was signed in 1948, that is the time when Indian Constitution was being framed. And the Indian Constitution is so good that it incorporated the human rights into the Constitution as fundamental rights, as rights which can be enforced, as rights which are superior to other rights, as rights for which the constitutional remedies entail directly approaching even the Supreme Court under Article 32 or the High Court under Article 26. Consequently, the primacy given to human rights as also to fundamental rights in our Constitution, right since the beginning, is of a very high order.
So from a global perspective, do you see also according this kind of a position to the right to privacy? India is unique in giving this status.
Sorry, the signal got interrupted.
Yes, Jainji. Do you even see other countries according that much of value to the right to privacy, or India is among the few countries which has given this the status of a fundamental right and is giving it that level of importance, right from the concept of its conception? Like for the audience, as you were mentioning, that the Constitution, the right to life entails right to privacy, which was laid down as early as the time once the Constitution was enacted in the year period of 1950s, in the case of Madhukar Mandika versus State of Maharashtra. So it was something that the Indian judiciary had set forth way back. And it's just that, with the Justice Puttaswamy judgment and everything coming to light now, that suddenly people are talking about privacy, but we always had it enshrined in the Constitution. So do you see other nations also, yes, do you see other nations also giving it that value? Do you see India as a unicorn in this space, or it was something which was already there for the other nations and we have kind of adopted it?
We are among the few countries which have adopted this formally. So it was encoded into our Constitution right since the beginning. The interpretations, of course, as time evolved, situations evolved, technology developed, problems evolved. So the interpretations kept on evolving. Besides the article that you mentioned, like Article 23, right against self-incrimination, also had grains of right to privacy, where under a person could not be compelled to give out private information which could incriminate. So we are among the few countries which already have coded fundamental rights, and other countries, some of them have, some are in the process of. Law is an evolving process in all the countries. Law has to conform to the social values, the norms and the roles assigned to different people. So different countries are at different stages of evolution of the law on privacy, the jurisprudence on privacy. In fact, we also have evolved. The jurisprudence was substantially and qualitatively made better by the Puttaswamy judgment. And I'm sure there would be more judgments in the future which would further evolve the concept of privacy and how it applies to India in course of time. So India is on a certain trajectory of history of evolution of jurisprudence on privacy. Similarly, other countries have their own respective trajectories, but we are considerably advanced in that.
My next question to you, Jainji, would be, what own areas of conflict, how do you see the breach of this right of privacy or its preservation of the right of privacy? How do you view this? Like, for example, in what own areas, like we may see a lot of areas, especially globally today, where there is violence against children, violence against women. There is some content generated in these conflict and war-torn areas, women abuse content being circulated on the internet, male torture content also, which we call war porn, which is being circulated. And in a way, it is completely a breach of an individual's privacy. Like I would say, okay, the person may not survive the torture, but post that also, the availability of such content where individuals' dignity is completely lost, and such kind of content being available on the internet. What is your view, and how is this being internationally held?
Let's look at it historically. Historically, when wars were fought, they were fought between armies of two or more different states. Consequently, the wherewithal of the state structure and its organs got involved in the war. People to people engagement in war was very limited in nature. Cyber now has provided a medium for people to also engage in war, whether a conflict between the states is on or not. So there could be scenarios where two countries are at war and the state's organs are at war, fighting on the battlefront. At the same time, people of the two different states are also individually so worked up on their jingoism or nationalism or fervor for the national cause that they are also using the cyber medium to wage a war against the people of the other country or against the data assets of the other country. So the nations now need to protect during conflict situations. Nations now need to protect not only the organs and the instrumentalities engaged in the war, but also those instrumentalities which are not engaged in war and which may be at considerable geographical distance from the battle lines. So to that extent, the responsibilities of nation states towards protection of privacy and other rights of their individuals has increased considerably due to cyber medium.
Yes, Jainji. As a matter of fact, I think even with the kind of conflicts going on, the dark web, sometimes even the surface web, there are multiple portals which are filled up with this kind of post content. And some of these areas or burning hot areas of conflict have become areas of content generation, in a way, commercial content generation of this nature. What are governments doing anything about this? Do you see what our Indian government's approach towards this kind of content?
I lost your signal. Do you see? After that, I missed it.
Yes. Do you see governments globally taking action against this? See the Indian government's stand this, what kind of structure we have in place with respect to this kind of content, which is what classify as war content, and in a way, a lot of conflict areas have become content generators of this nature.
Yes, so it's a difficult process for nations in the sense, number one, they need to have the legal infrastructure in place. Legal infrastructure means the laws as also the law enforcement machineries. And technology and cyber particularly, the medium is so complex, so difficult. It's boundaryless, it flows from one place to the other seamlessly. So to have a law on cyber is also a difficult process. Plus, the technologies keep on changing and there are qualitative changes. For instance, right now the buzzword is generative AI. Yes. And people are discussing about how to control generative AI and whether excessive legislation would curb creativity or not, whether there should be legislation or some kind of control, what kind of control. All the nations are discussing. Meanwhile, the technology continues in the public sphere, and technology is used by different people for different means. So in conflict areas, the technologies and the available technologies can be used even while some nations are busy gearing up their own legal systems to be able to combat it. And even if they have laws in place, even then it's very difficult to control cyber, the technology of cyber, because of its very inherent fundamental nature. But yes, nations do need to take steps to protect their people from cyber intrusions during conflict times.
So, have you seen breaches of national data happening in terms of, in situations of war, or as even our Honorable Prime Minister said that, the next war that he sees would not be maybe on ground. It is going to be a cyber warfare situation. So how do you see data breaches that are occurring and its impact and threat to national sovereignty? Would this somehow come as a classification of cyber terrorism, or do you see this simply as commercial activities that are going on, especially when national data is being targeted, like a lot of citizen data residing at one place, or maybe critical infrastructure of the government? Then what do you perceive of this?
So, madam, war through the cyber medium is fought not only when there is a conflict, but also when there is no conflict. It can be any time, either through state actor or through non-state actor. And definitely, cyber would continue to play a significant role, particularly during conflict times between two nations. Like I said, it would be used as a medium not only by the state actor during conflict time, but also by some of its people, the non-state actors during conflict times. And when there is no conflict, the cyber is used as a medium, say, for terrorism purposes. It could be used. You would have heard about terrorist organizations trying to recruit people using cyber as a medium, or
Yeah.
trying to ideologically motivate people to join their organization. ISIS was one such example which was doing that. And
Yeah.
people who had never met any ISIS leader, who had never been to the geographical area where ISIS was operating, there were cases where people got significantly motivated and wanted to go and join that terrorist organization and fight for the cause that they were fighting. Fortunately, you have also noticed that India, despite having a significant population of the community, did not have many persons who opted to go like that. We had only about 100 odd persons who were there. People with far lesser populations of the community, thousands of people went from those countries. So our internal social structures, community value systems were such that people did not get easily swayed. But that was one example that I cited, wherein even when our nation was not in conflict, it was not at war, yet non-state actors were able to use cyber as a medium to motivate people to join in their terrorist ideology. There could be other methods also. We came across cases where money was transferred to further the cause of some terrorist organizations using cyber as a medium, or where travel arrangements were made for people, or arrangements for refuge were made for people using cyber as a medium. All these individually may not amount to a terrorist attack, but when combined with other features, they bolster, they reinforce, they are able to effectuate the terrorist act. So consequently, even when there is no conflict, non-state actors or state actors may indulge in terrorist activities in another country using cyber as a medium. Besides cyber terrorism, there could also be threats like, for instance, ransomware, or simple case of fraud in the bank using cyber as a medium, or it could also be cyber espionage, gleaning information through cyber as a medium, strategic information. Or it could also be debilitating certain structures or certain decision-making positions of a government through by hacking into the systems, etc. So there are different ways in which ICT is used as a medium to further the cause, a negative cause of one country's people against the other country.
There is this complete buzz that is going around that, there is a lot of psychological manipulation that is happening over the internet. Even you touched upon this. So there is, you could say a rumor going around, news and media talking about it, that, state actors tend to influence a nation's population and its voting habits based on profiling by social media applications and multiple other applications that are profiling them and in a way psychologically manipulating them. How much truth is there in this?
Oh, there's significant amount of truth. In fact, I recall about 4 or 5 years back, the US had also submitted indictments in the court on that matter, accusing some foreign agencies of having tried to influence the poll outcomes in the US presidential election. They submitted formal charge sheets, indictments in the US court. So this is quite plausible, and does happen.
So in that situation, a breach of an individual's privacy, when we are talking, let's say, an Indian's privacy, where his personal data is being breached or he's being profiled without his permission, which is in a way a data breach, then in that situation, in your view, how much of a threat to national sovereignty is this? Because then suddenly we are not just looking at an individual's life or his liberty at threat. We're looking at an entire nation suddenly, isn't it, Jain?
Yes, it is. Democracy, as you know, is one of the fundamental features, is part of the basic structure of our constitution. Now, if you are able to if you're able to influence the democratic process in a manner in which one wants, if any third person, in any person, either state actor or non-state actor from another country is able to influence the democratic processes according to what he wants, yes, it does impact the basic sovereignty, integrity of the country.
But that's a very alarming thing, as a matter of fact, because of the social media penetration amongst youngsters, among people today. Everybody is very opinionated about a lot of subjects. Do you see any kind of, you could say, awareness among people as to, what their opinion should be and how they should not be psychologically manipulated? When you're interacting with people, how much of awareness do you see about this form of manipulation among them? Do they realize it?
It's always a work. This kind of thing is always a work in progress, education and sensitization. So we, among other countries, we have significant numbers who are using ICT technologies. So we have about 800 million people connected to the internet. We have 1.4 billion digital identities, Aadhaar. We have ONDC. So our digital public infrastructure is so large. Nearly 45% of the digital monetary transactions in the world, they take place in India. So consequently, on the one hand, this is very good, but on the other hand, the potential for damaging us is also far higher because of these numbers. So educating people and sensitizing people on these issues is a constant work in progress. Every organization needs to do it. You would find that organizations like the RBI or your own bank or TRAI, these people keep sending you SMSs or alert emails educating you that do not respond to unsolicited mail or do not respond to unsolicited phone calls or some such thing. So it's an ongoing process. One has to. It'll never be sufficient. You will always have to strive hard to do more in this field.
And, Jainji, where there have been cases, I think it has been quite much in the media also, that over the last few years, our government has taken proactive steps to ban mobiles being manufactured or brands of mobiles coming from a particular nation. TikTok and apps from a particular nation have been completely disallowed and banned in India, on the entire thought process that there is a threat to privacy of individuals and national sovereignty. How much water is there in that? And do you really think these measures are capable enough to secure our national sovereignty, considering the absolute threat to privacy digitally existing today?
So as far as on the sufficiency part is concerned, given the dynamic nature of the cyber as a medium, I don't think there would anything be sufficient. Any action would be sufficient, because cyber medium would always find some other alternate way of doing it. But that does not mean that one does not take any action. So you keep taking action, whatever action one thinks is necessary in order to protect one's own assets, digital assets, but without questioning whether this is the final thing and that now I'm completely safe. No way. You may have done a lot, yet the possibility of your digital assets getting compromised is still remain. The proportional threat to it would reduce. Yes. The likelihood of its getting compromised reduced by taking certain steps, yes, but the threat still remains because it could be coming from some other sources. What if an enemy country were to start manufacturing the mobiles in a third country with trapdoors fitted into the hardware of the built-in software of the mobile phones? You may not be able to detect that. So there are different ways in which one could find vulnerabilities in the system. But that does not mean that one does not take any action. One should keep taking action wherever one thinks that one's rights or nation's security is being compromised, and keep checking whether there are other areas where nation's sovereignty or security is being compromised, and then ponder over the decisions which need to be taken.
So when we talk of cyber espionage, do you really see that only happening in times of conflict or war between two nations, or are nations and state actors actively indulging in it even in non-situations of war, like North Korea's Sony Pictures instance that occurred, and many instances in India where proactively we have gone ahead and blocked applications from nations. Do you see this happening even without a conflict, or it is normally only based on some background conflict that this can be classified that a state actor is committing this act against another state actor?
Puneet ji, espionage has in different literatures has been defined as among the oldest professions in the world. So it does not wait for conflict. Even Chanakya's treatise also talks of espionage, even when there is no war. So espionage is not related to war. Espionage is related to clandestine methods of acquiring information about another country. It may only be for a passive defensive purpose. It does not mean that it is necessarily aggressive, but it could have elements of that too. So espionage is definitely not related to conflicts between two nations. Espionage keeps continuing. You may not find evidence of it because by its very nature, state actors are involved. They take a lot of precautions in hiding their footprints, and but it goes on. In fact, espionage can also be through open sources. So something which is openly available in something like the World Wide Web, one can conduct espionage through that. I can glean information from open sources. It's a significant source of information from the perspective of intelligence.
So you mean to say like collecting information using the internet and the multiple resources, their classification of the population using it based on their demographics, based on their nationality. So actively this kind of an activity is done by nation states.
I'm sure they would do it. Look at it this way. If a guy, or let me tell you one example. There was I think it was United Bank of India or Union Bank of India. It was around 2017. Now, about a dozen of its employees received an email ostensibly from the RBI, and it had a file, an attachment, which was an executable file. Now, half a dozen of its employees who were technically savvy, they realized that this is an executable file, they should not open it. 2-3 others reported it to their security people that this is something suspicious. One of them clicked it, and subsequently incidents happened. But prior to that, how did that person, whosoever was the originator of that email message, got the email IDs of these people? So he was obviously able to get the email IDs from open sources. He knew that they were working in such and such bank. And at random, I presume, he must have sent email to 2 dozen, maybe 100 odd guys. Even if one guy clicks, he's able to plant his rat or his Trojan into the system to be able to do whatever he wants to do. So even picking up information to carry out an activity for a bank heist or for conning a bank, you would need information relating to the person. For phishing attacks are what? You need the target's particulars to be able to direct that email, that phishing email on that person. And get that, you can get it from open sources.
Yes, Ji. One thing that comes to my mind, when we were talking about this collection of information, our Indian Data Protection Act talks about, where there are restrictions on collection of information and tracking of information by applications and service providers to children. How do you perceive this kind of a restriction with respect to tracking and data collection about children, and what risks are children actually exposed to if this kind of a legislation is not really imposed, or if organizations don't genuinely comply with this law in terms of minors?
I think it's an excellent provision in the DPDPA Act to have this to protect the interests of children. Children, under any law, or non-adults under any law, are presumed not to be able to be mature enough to give a valid consent, a consent based on evaluating the different pros and cons of whatever the option is given. Consequently, the level of protection required to children is of a very high order as compared to those of adults. And hence, specific legal provisions need to be in place, particularly for children. You would notice that the DPDP Act has provisions where under the consent of the parent or the guardian of the ward, or even that, say, in case of a disabled person, if a person is appointed as his guardian under the Guardianship and Wards Act, the consent of that person needs to be taken for collection and processing of data of such a person. Hence, these legal provisions are necessary to protect the interests of a child.
Coming to the next part, Jainji, is question almost everybody would have on their mind, that intelligence of every country in national interest has some level of surveillance. So how is this surveillance balanced with privacy rights?
All rights, including fundamental rights, are not absolute rights. Due process of law, as in the US law, or in our case, procedure established by law. So any restriction which is imposed on a fundamental right has to be based on the due process, the process prescribed in law, the procedure established by law. And in the Puttaswamy judgment, I think it mentioned about legality of the procedure, the proportionality, and the necessity. So I think these were the three tests that they prescribed whenever there is any restriction on the right to privacy. So right to privacy is not an absolute right, but wherever it needs to be infringed, then these are the three benchmarks on which such infringement would need to rest.
We cannot hear.
Can you hear me now?
I cannot hear the last one.
So whenever any surveillance kind of measure is to be undertaken by the state, then such a measure should have been prescribed under law. So it should be legal measure. It should be a necessary provision, and one should not be able to gather that information through any other alternate means. It should be proportional. It should be proportional to whatever is required and not absolute in nature. So these kind of restrictions the Puttaswamy judgment already has in place: the legality, necessity, proportionality, etc. And the UN General Assembly, they have also I think similarly imposed some restrictions. Yes, there is a resolution of the UN General Assembly. They also, it's a resolution of 2022 on the right to privacy. They also have similar provisions of legality and necessity whenever right to privacy is encroached upon by an organ of the state.
Rajiv, when the DPDP Act was enacted, in the media, there was a lot of frenzy that this gives the government a lot of powers to have surveillance over individuals. Somehow people seem to forget that, private organizations like Google or other tech giants have a way more access to data without any form of regulation. And, this entire difference of national interest and profiling, which is happening for commercial interest, there was a complete distortion of the same. What is your opinion on this? Like the way the entire act to a great extent was painted in the media?
Without commenting on what came into the media, but this is quite true that we willingly, most of us, including me or anyone else, whenever a routine kind of thing comes up, declaration comes up, when I'm using a software or an app or something, without reading its provisions, one just signs, oh, I agree. So we give out a lot of information which is not required while using a lot of these foreign platforms or OTT players. But it's only when the state comes into the picture and there is alleged threat of state using the individual's data that people come up with issues of state being excessive. But private organizations have also been similarly excessive. In fact, some of these private organizations, if you see, have elements of sovereignty. What is sovereignty? There was something called, there's a place called Westphalia, and there was a Treaty of Westphalia in 1648. It defined what is a nation state. So a nation state being something which has which has a territory, defined geographical territory. It has a sovereign, it has people, it has certain laws in place. Around the same time, Hobbes, there was a philosopher in Europe, Hobbes, subsequently Locke and Rousseau. Hobbes also talked of a sovereign who was able to frame laws, and there was a social contract theory wherein people gave all the powers to the sovereign. So the notion of sovereignty emerged around that time. It evolved around that time, 17th, 18th centuries. And sovereignty was then considered to be exercised by the sovereign within the geographical territories. Over a period of time, of course, it has moved from sovereignty of the sovereign, sovereignty of parliament, to sovereignty of judiciary or sovereignty of people as expressed through the constitution, etc. That's a separate debate. The point is, still it is confined to geographical boundaries. Cyber as a medium transgresses all these. It does not bother about geographical mediums. It crosses through all these boundaries. Consequently, the big corporations which control these cyber mediums, or which have a significant chunk of the cyber medium, in whichever way, in terms of number of subscribers, or in terms of number of transactions, or in terms of geographical spread, but they acquire some elements of sovereignty in the sense, if you try and impose a control here in India, they may be based in some other country, so they would try and take the refuge there, or in a third country, or in a fourth country. Their internal processes may be rigged differently to conform to different countries' regulations, rather than having an absolute version which caters to all the countries' regulations. So, because these big companies acquire certain elements of sovereignty, they come into conflict with national sovereignty at times. When we give our data willingly to an OTT player, then, and he takes it away from our country, the data rests elsewhere, and it gets processed elsewhere, and maybe it gets anonymized, and then subsequently stratified, indexed, etc., and used for maybe a commercial purpose. So if I'm say wanting a train ticket from here to Mumbai, and I Google on it, subsequently one would find the pop-ups would keep coming to me for hotel reservations or this or that, alternate things. So obviously, someone has been able to check that, yes, I'm going on this site, this is my interest, and these are collateral interests which I may be wanting. So, yes, there has been a debate on when the state seeks data from people, and there has been very less debate on when large corporations controlling cyber as a medium, when they seek data, we don't bother too much, but they use it commercially, say.
So why is it that the perceived risk of the state misusing it is more as compared to the private organizations, when they can actually sell the database left, right, center, and that's a way higher threat as compared to a government organization? Why is the entire threat overall in the public mind, the scenario that, oh, what will the government do with my data? Why is that sudden mindset always there?
That's an excellent question to which no categorical answer can be given, but partly the reason is that state is normally imbued with significant amount of powers over the lives of a common man. So, so it is presumed that the state may use powers beyond what is prescribed in the law. That apprehension is always there in the minds of people. Consequently, advocates, judiciary, parliament, they are all there to they act as a check and balance on the powers of the sovereign of the country. And it is also presumed that when we are giving our data to a private entity, the private entity would ultimately maybe use it only for commercial purposes after anonymizing the data. But the likelihood of private entity giving to a state actor, which is inimical to you, that also remains.
Yes.
But one does not get to see it. Now, if that were to happen, then the problem gets compounded. Because private entity has a large amount of data and it gives to a state which is inimical to you, then there is a larger problem. But people don't see that kind of threat. Visually, it is not apparent because that state will not make it public. The private entity will not make it public. So it does not come into the public domain that this kind of a threat also exists. At the same time, whichever private organization would do it, they would do it with some restraints because they themselves would be wary of losing their market in case this were to get known. So one wouldn't get to know whether this has happened or not, but there are different pitfalls and threats in private agencies also managing a significant amount of data.
Since you mentioned this, it just came to the top of my mind. The Cambridge Analytica Facebook matter that was highly sensitive and actually involved something of what you were just talking about. And though the only thing that was spoken about was, with respect to election results. But honestly, the amount of data and the profiling that occurred, I think what you were mentioning, the risk of a private organization misusing the data being really high, especially an actual case of this nature existing.
It's possible. It's possible that misuse by private organization, it's possible.
Jain, what outcome do you predict of data breaches involving Aadhaar data? Like, there's a lot of apprehension among people, Aadhaar data is getting breached, the database is getting breached, and that people confidence that is not there. Though I have never heard of the biometric per se being breached. What we are normally talking about is the name and the information available on the card itself per se, like not your iris scan, etc. The information on the card, because a lot of people are giving it left, right, center. There are multiple third-party service providers. So what do you perceive about this, the outcomes of this form of data breach that has occurred and the people perception around it?
Okay, so the Aadhaar data broadly has two kinds of data. One is the biometric data, the other is the demographic detail. The demographic detail is the individual's name, etc., etc. I have not come across a single incident where the data which resides in Aadhaar or which is being processed by Aadhaar, the UIDAI, has been breached. What one does keep hearing about is that someone's name and his Aadhaar number and some other demographic detail have been breached. But these could be from third sources because one fills in one's own data, name and other demographic details, including Aadhaar number, for availing of different kinds of services. It is possible that some of those have been breached. But whether it is data relating to my email ID or data relating to my Aadhaar or something else, breach of any data is a problem. It can be used maliciously. Like I gave you the example of that UBI case.
Yes, Jain. So what are your views on the Data Protection Act coming at this point of time when data has been a big challenge, misuse of data has been the major issue, profiling, data breaches, a complete violation of every individual's privacy? Today, a person may not be realizing the same, but almost everybody's privacy has been, you could say, breached in India in some way or the other, whether it may be by any organization, whether it may be by individuals. It has happened digitally. Everybody's privacy has been breached. So in the light of this, how do you see the impact of the Data Protection Act, its provisions? How do you perceive the act? Do you see it as a welcome move or something which, like a lot of big tech companies are considering restrictive? So what is your overall opinion about this?
I think it's an excellent move by the government, the DPDP Act, and it has been on the works for quite some time. The government has held discussions with all stakeholders over different rounds of discussions with all stakeholders, including the OTT players, for instance, intermediaries or different ministries of the government, the technical experts, cyber people, etc., has also benefited from legislation or steps being taken in other countries. And different formulations came out, and after considerable discussion over tens of thousands of people, there's also the parliament. The government came out with this act. It is an excellent move, and it casts responsibilities on the data fiduciary for, say, collecting data only limited to the purpose for which it is being taken. So if you read the illustrations given in the act, they are so good. In one of the illustrations, for instance, it mentioned that person A signs into an app, and the app says that he wants the personal details, but he also wants the list of contacts. Now, the list of contacts is not necessary for discharge of the function for which that person was subscribing to the app. And hence, the protection available on the issue of list of contacts would not be applicable to that. Protection would not be available to the data fiduciary. So it is a significant which protects the rights of people, as also casts a responsibility on data fiduciaries and on data processing units, as also on the government, plus prescribes procedures on enforcement of the provisions and also heavy penal provisions.
That's a very interesting perspective, Jainji, because again, overall, the perception of people with the DPDP Act has been, mixed bag, especially because it was suddenly enacted, a lot of lack of awareness and information about the act, what it envisages, the risks that the act is protecting people from. Also, to a great extent, they have not been educated about that. Like that was, one of the key things what we were discussing, and this session with you was so important, so that individuals understand that it's not just about privacy of me as a person that is at stake, privacy of my national safety, my family, my country. So many things are at stake with my individual data being breached also. So let's say hundreds of individuals, thousands, lakhs of Indians, individual data being breached is suddenly a bigger threat than what can actually be perceived. Jainji, over here, I would welcome all the audience to please type in your questions that you have. This is an opportunity for you to ask your questions to Jainji. And in the meanwhile, I'm going to come to the closing remarks about your journey. I would like to know your journey, as what I say. आपने अभी तक अपने जीवन का सार क्या निकाला है? You have worked in the Intelligence Bureau, you worked with the police prior, you worked with the National Human Rights Commission, you've been a family man, and overall in life, lots of personal developments, professional developments. This question is not really related to purely data protection, but I would consider you as a human library here, and for us to take insight from your learnings of life.
It's been such a grand play, and I have cherished, I've loved, I've enjoyed every day of my life as a police officer, the state of different districts, but also in the IB, as also in the NHRC, and I've learned so much. And most of the credit for me to discharge all these functions goes to my wife, who has given me sufficient space to be able to discharge, to undertake functions and charge them to most satisfaction. I've loved done all.
Jainji, we can't hear you. Some connectivity.
Okay, so I'll repeat what I said. I said that I've enjoyed my journey during 40 years service to the government and to the people of India. I've enjoyed every bit of it, every day I've enjoyed. And I owe this largely to my wife, who had sufficient space, has been under, and allowed me to be able to do all this. As a police officer in the state of Bihar, I worked IB in the government, I worked in the NHRC, the National Human Rights Commission, and all of these provided me avenues of knowledge, as also avenues of giving me the satisfaction that I've been able to do something for the people of the country.
So I think even your family would have had to, undergo transfers with you to sensitive areas, the challenges that they would have also in this entire journey. Your children.
That's something which my wife keeps reminding me about, that she's had to shift 15 houses in 20 years or something like that.
Yes.
So our years in service were I was on the move, part of the game. One suffers, yes, but at the same time, there are positive aspects to each of the things. I get exposed to so much more variety, so much more geographical area, much more different kinds of problems. It makes you relatively immune to disruptions or alterations of the environment. It provides you strength. It provides you experience. It provides you knowledge. So all that part of the children suffered. Oh, okay. So, for instance, when I was in Canada, so they learn Hindi, English, French, and they forgot their Hindi. So for 1 year, we struggled with teaching them Hindi back. Took them to a Hindi movie every week. They didn't know the difference between social science and science or geography. They didn't know the difference. It took them quite some time, a year and a half, to be able to get back on the rail. Also, every change, there is a change of minds, there's a change of climate. Yes, it would be difficult for them, but I'm also sure that it would have built in resilience within them and become acceptable to all the different circumstances. So these circumstances, despite its difficulties, also enriched us significantly. I'm thankful that we went through all that.
So definitely saluting your family and wife also for supporting you in this journey of 40, 50 years of state service and dedicated state service towards all the citizens of our country. All of us are thanking you for the same in this. And with this, I will come to a couple of questions which are there. Please say something, Mr. Jain. Please complete what you were saying.
So I have a question. How does the digitalization of personal information challenge traditional interpretations of privacy as a fundamental legal right? And what measures can be implemented to safeguard individual privacy in the evolving landscape? So, the need for has increased significantly. Advent of technology and our society becoming far complex. Long time back, a few generations back, people living in a village, they would know what's cooking in the other house. They would know what kind of they are getting. Privacy then. Privacy also is an evolving concept. With geographical mobility, educational mobility, significant amount of accretion in the population, with technology coming in, anonymization of people. So now if I'm living in a multi-story building, I know the person who's living next door. So if someone were to ask me to verify that his name is such and such and his father's name is such and such, I won't be able to do it. But a few generations back in a village, if the postman or the policeman were to go and does this reside here, people would be able to say, yes, he resides here. Uske baap ka naam, maa ka naam ye hai, chaar bhaiyon, dhanda ye hai, they would be able to say that. No longer. Consequently, alternate methodologies for information on people need to be there. And with advent of technology, the problem is aggregate such information, it's its own. So individually, if my data is there in separate file and so is your data, but it is in separate hard file, and so is data of a million in separate million different files, it would not be a problem because the privacy is protected by that file and one is not aggregating the data. Now, technology, I can aggregate the data. The apprehensions of people typifying it or indexing it on different ways, those kind of apprehensions come in which are general. So as jurisprudence, as technology improves, society changes, economies change, the jurisprudence on the subject also change. And so the change has occurred in India also. And the Puttaswamy judgment and the DPDPA Act are steps in that direction. And I'm quite sure, like I said earlier, that in course of time, I'm quite sure there would be far more judgments and laws on this subject because the technology is only increasing. With generative AI, for instance, the problem of deep fakes. Now, what kind of regimen you want to control that? One would need to figure that out, and such that it does not hamper creativity. So it's an evolving landscape. Now, how to understand privacy between individual right and state monitoring? I've dwelt on this earlier that the Puttaswamy judgment was very clear. Right to privacy is integral to the right to life and liberty guaranteed under Article 21 of our Constitution. And any infringement of that right has to be premised on specific legal provisions and the procedure prescribed under law, as also the necessity of being able to do that, as also the proportionality of doing it. And not only that, there would also be judicial review. It is open to review, besides the administrative review. So the next question that I have is, what career opportunities will be open for freshers after DPDP Act will come into force? So cyber security is, as a profession, I think it will continue to be extremely important because the domain, the technology is going to improve, the domain is going to expand. There would be various layers of it, qualitatively different layers that would come in. You would have read about different countries wanting to create, the armies of different countries wanting to create a cyber command in addition to the territorial commands that they may have. So even a cyber command. So the medium is so important to protect the country's security and sovereignty that you need a separate command for that. The defense forces need a separate command for that. So consequently, a significant amount of opportunities would be there. As far as DPDP Act is concerned, so data monitors, etc., those kind of provisions would be there. As also companies would need to hire, they would need to have they would need to have mechanisms in place for, say, grievance redressal. So processing of those grievance redressal, the communications with the board, the data board, which is there, for all that people would be required. And main thing is technology. The more the technology comes in, the more employment, newer avenues of employment will come in. The next question is, how do you feel about companies collecting our data for targeted advertising? That's a good question. If you were to ask, look, it facilitates you. At the same time, it has some inherent risks. So if you're driving on a road, it facilitates you, it enables you to go fast, reach your place, your destination fast, but at the same time, there are pitfalls there. There could be there's likelihood of accidents. So consequently, every positive may have on its flip side some negative. And similarly, collection of data by different companies may facilitate you, but at the same time would have its pitfalls. Now, recently, I wanted to have a digital signature. I'd never got one made. So I inquired from someone, and then I found the process so simple. I just gave my Aadhaar card, PAN card, whatever, and they gave me a link, and I went on the video call, and within 5 minutes, that video call, 2 minutes, that video call was done, and then a link came to me that I can download my digital signature. Now, that's convenience. I was able to do it within 15, 20 minutes, half an hour max. But at the same time, I'm quite sure there would be pitfalls within it. So when you ask me what do I feel about companies collecting our data for targeted advertising, well, it facilitates you. When you are seeing on Amazon, for instance, you are seeing a certain product, it also simultaneously shows you what other products other buyers bought when they bought this product. So products which are similar in nature or products which can be used in conjunction with it. So it facilitates you. But at the same time, they are also directing your choice. They are influencing your choice. So you have to be conscious about that. That's it. I'm done with the questions, Puneet ji.
Thank you very much for answering all our audience questions, Jain ji. And this has been an amazing session. Hope you also enjoyed it. But I'm quite certain I really enjoyed this session with you, and even the audience would feel really enriched getting the insight from such a senior person who served the nation for so many years, and his practical insight on the issues of privacy. So everybody in right now, everywhere talks theoretical insights, but the actual person on field with the practical insights has been you. And thank you very much for consenting for this session.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very much, Jain. Thank you.